Well, he's a regular feature on this show. He's done his best to completely destroy the established church in this country. Here he was last night in the House of Lords speaking on the Rwanda debate.
We go back to the development of international human rights law, particularly in the period after 1945, in totally separating domestic and international law. The rise in international human rights law grew out of the horrors of the 1940s, where a government that in 1933 in Germany had been legally and properly elected passed horrific laws that did terrible things, starting from within a few weeks of the election of Adolf Hitler.
It's extraordinary. He's drawing a direct comparison between this government's behaviour and that of Hitler's National Socialists in office in Germany in the 1930s. He did, though, say later on in the speech that the scale of what was happening here wasn't quite as bad as Hitler. I mean, what on earth is he doing? It is never, ever useful in any debate or conversation to draw any comparison with Hitler at all. I firmly, firmly believe that. Furthermore, he talks about Churchill in this speech of the 1951 Convention on Human Rights. Yes, that was designed for a post-war world after we'd seen direct racial and religious, well, not just persecution, actually extermination. Here we now are, over 70 years on, with hundreds of millions of people wanting to move around the world, some with good intentions, many not. The whole thing drives me mad. I honestly think we should try and get rid of this bloke if we possibly could. Well, I'm joined by Richard Pietrovich, Professor of Law at Aberystwyth University and Vice President of the Council of Europe's group, Experts Against Trafficking of Humans. And Richard, we all want sensible international cooperation and agreements, but he seems to be glorifying the fact that the European Court of Human Rights in Strasbourg can override acts by our elected government, and somehow draws a comparison with National Socialism. And I put it to you that this is not what this was designed to do back in 1951.
I think that the Archbishop of Canterbury is overstating the case by seriously overstating the case by comparing the UK with Nazi Germany. But the issue that I think he is raising, which is real, is that there is no safe and legal way for people to migrate to the UK. I know that the Home Secretary has spoken about this, but there's no safe and legal way. The only way to come to the UK is by small boats, because we are on an island. And I think that the UK has to do its bit to accept people who have nowhere else to go. Germany has accepted more than 1 million. Turkey has accepted 4 million. We've accepted 50,000.
No. That's absolute rot, isn't it? We've accepted 500,000 people since 2016 as refugees into this country, and they've come here from Afghanistan, and they've come here from Hong Kong, and they've come here from Ukraine. And I would argue that, you mentioned Germany, 1 million. Well, they haven't taken them willingly, but they've turned up across the Mediterranean, and the Germans have felt there isn't much they can do about it.
There isn't much they could do about it, because they are on continental Europe and they had no choice. We have a choice, and we choose, because we are an island, not to accept people. Now, one thing I do think is very important is that there should not be uncontrolled migration into any country. The UK, like any country, has a right to protect its borders. But that does not mean that, in my opinion, that we should be isolating ourselves from that. We are a wealthy country, and I think we could be doing a lot more. And when I hear today about the Calais Agreement, which James Cleverly was talking about, he talks about this as a good move forward. And in some ways it is. But I think it's very unfortunate that the UK is talking about working with social media. The UK should be legislating to force social media to tackle online activity that promotes people smuggling. The social media is something which is almost out of control, and the UK could be doing more, not to work with them, but to force them to do more to actually reduce the risks for people who are going onto small boats.
Yeah, I mean, the Calais Agreement, so-called, that's been struck today, James Cleverly, between us and the French and one or two others, I mean, it's designed, isn't it, to stop the supply of small boats getting to the beaches, to stop the weapon, effectively, that is being used by the traffickers. But the problem is, the financial reward for the traffickers is so great that on a calm week in the summer, one gang can make 3-4 million euros.
Yeah, I agree. That's why they're doing it. That's why criminals do these things. But there's another aspect of this. What do we mean by small boats? Do we mean dinghies? Do we mean speedboats? I have not seen any attempt to define what will be those small boats. And if you're trying to introduce new laws, you need to be very specific about that. And I think that what I have heard so far is actually rather too vague, and I would like to see more about it. But also, I would like to see more about the UK doing its bit to find safe and legal ways to bring people to the UK who really have, in my opinion, very little choice. You don't leave your home in Iraq or Syria because you just think it's going to be better in the UK. You leave because you're desperate.
Well, I'm not sure about that, because 91% of those that landed last year were men. Of those, about 78% were young men. These weren't women and children. These weren't the traditional pictures we would associate with refugees. These were fit young men, and many of whom, of course, will come into this country and go into criminality. And that's the problem. You've got the gangs operating
if you're a fit young man,
at both ends.
If you're a fit young man, then there's a good chance you'll be forced into the army or into some militia group or something like that. So I think there's a very good reason why fit young men are trying to leave those countries. I am not trying to say that the UK should be open to all irregular migrants. Absolutely not. But I think that we could be doing a lot more to do our fair share.